As I mentioned a second ago, the BBC has claimed that people would have to pay more than £450 a year in subscriptions to commercial rivals to get television, radio and news of the same quality that the BBC provide. The figure, almost 3 times the price of the TV licence, has been calculated by the BBC as it lobbies the government for more money. In a report published yesterday, the BBC warned difficult choices that will impact programmes and services if it were required to find more savings. In the last decade, senior management roles have been cut from 522 to 253. Pay for on-air talent has fallen from 15% of content spending to 10%. So they're making progress. Tim Luckhurst is a former BBC executive, veteran media commentator as well, and principal of South College, Durham, too. Always good to have you on, Tim. I mean, I was trying to work out whether the BBC have slightly shot themselves in the foot on this one.
Well, I think that what Tim Davie, the Director General, was trying to do was to say, look, the BBC produces an awful lot of very valuable stuff. And if you wanted to do it commercially without the licence fee, it would cost you a lot more than it costs you now. I think the problem with that is the assumption that it would cost £450 or so assumes that many fewer people would be willing to pay it than are currently obliged to pay the licence fee. And whilst that's a pessimistic view from the Director General, I suspect it's a realistic one.
Do we know, and I've never heard this said, Sim, and it may be unfair to just throw this one at you, has there ever been any kind of survey as to how many people would pay the licence fee if it was voluntary?
There have been various attempts to do it, Ian, but it depends what the BBC's offering. The problem is that there are people who would pay for the Today programme on BBC Radio 4 and Newsnight, and others who would pay for the one show in Strictly Come Dancing. You'd have to have a range of different subscriptions because not everybody would want everything. And that's the problem with the BBC. The truth is that if the BBC did become a subscription service, I think it would be a much smaller BBC than it is now. And it would probably only appeal to a small or relatively small minority of people who probably want the really high-end stuff. Because most of the entertainment material could and probably would be made very effectively by commercial broadcasters. A lot of very successful TV already is made by commercial broadcasters. I think you'd end up with the BBC News, the BBC documentary, the original drama, perhaps some original music, but you wouldn't have mass market entertainment. They'd simply pull out.
Has the entire model of an eclectic, mixed genre-based schedule stroke format, is that dying in itself? You think about how specified platforms such as Disney Plus or Netflix are. They've got it worked out. This is what we do. You take your choice, and but you know what we're about. Are the BBC completely behind the curve now?
They are trying desperately, and I think understandably, to defend a model of a universal free-to-air service which gives something for everybody. You ask a very important question. Does such a service have any future at all? I think the BBC partially recognises that it doesn't, in that it is putting an enormous amount of investment into streaming, the BritBox service, for example, BBC iPlayer, into podcasts on radio. It recognises that people don't consume linear broadcasting in the way that they used to. But it's using the licence fee to fund all of these things. And I understand why commercial competitors think that's unfair, because the BBC is exceptionally well funded through the universal licence fee.
Of course. Do you find it, I know I certainly find this difficult, Tim, but do you, as somebody who's been round the block, both as an executive at the Beeb and your subsequent work, commentating on it, lecturing on it, whatever it is you've been doing, do you find it increasingly harder to defend the position of the BBC or the existence of the BBC?
I think that the BBC is a superb British institution. I think it's very valuable to this country. I think it's one of the brands which is most widely recognised around the world. But I think that there is a very important conversation to be had about what the BBC should do, how big it should be, and how much people should pay for it. As you know, Ian, I defend the licence fee, but I don't defend the licence fee at its current level. I think that there has to be an intelligent, balanced, sensible conversation about what the BBC should do, what it doesn't need to do, and how much the license fee would need to be to fund the essential services which the BBC should continue to deliver. I know that I think those should include news and current affairs and documentaries. I know that I think they should include original drama and original music. I don't think they have to compete with the commercial sector in every area. And I do think that they disparage the commercial sector too often and don't recognise the quality of what the commercial sector can deliver in all sorts of forms.
Yeah. So cash in the attic would be in the bin in your world.
It would indeed, yes. In fact, it would never have been made.
Well, I'm with you on that, Tim. It's always good to talk. Thank you. Tim Luckhurst, Professor Tim Luckhurst, former BBC executive, his roles now including commentating and principal at South College in Durham. It is increasingly more difficult to defend the BBC. When I was growing up, it seemed like it was so magical, the BBC. Everything about the BBC was magical for me. And I'm thinking of the days of, Multicoloured Swap Shop, Saturday Superstore, all of that sense, Match of the Day, the Doctor Who, all those things that you kind of just associated, because the BBC felt like it did more than just make programmes. There was something within our cultural DNA that the BBC also sort of represented. When I look back at it now, I can see how they got it so horribly wrong in so many areas, because there was so much a lack of diversity in terms of, particularly in class, in the people that were running this thing. But they mostly pulled it off rather well. And then, in later life, at different stages, I've worked for the BBC for chunks of time, and then occasionally with the odd TV or radio appearance, whatever. And you begin to think this is increasingly difficult to intelligently argue about the existence of the BBC. I have no doubt that Tim Davies' 450 quid figure is true. If you were to say, put all of this on the table, right across the board, from its website, its news, CBeebies, all the different channels, the music, the radio, the online content, put all of that together, if you were to try to flog that on the commercial market, it'd cost you 450 quid a year. I get that. That's a statistical construct that doesn't stand up really to reality, because it still removes the component of whether people would pay for it within this debate. And that's the issue, isn't it? Would you pay for that if that was a completely optional service? And it saddens me in a way, because I can see the hugeness of online and news, and they don't always get it right, but let's assume they got it absolutely right. A state-funded news organisation in principle, how does that sit with you? Because once upon a time, Sky News used to be great. Remember when Sky News was great? If I was working from home in the day, I'd have that on in the background and nothing else. I loved it. Everything about it was great. Go-to place, and it's kind of changed a lot in the last few years. But one of the reasons it was great at the time was because of the existence of the BBC, because the BBC was a kind of trailblazer and it had a certain standard to it. So when Sky News came along, and people said, as they always say about any news organisation, oh, it's going to be the next Fox News, and it never is, by the way, but that was what was said at the time. And actually, what it did, it more emulated the good points of the BBC, but found its own USP in there and its own way of doing things, and it became great. And in fact, the BBC was great because it knew Sky News was there, and Sky News was great because it knew the BBC was there, and Sky became award-winning. I'm thinking of the Alex Crawford stuff and many other journos on there that did incredible work and broke stories way before others did. It was superb, and it was almost perfect, a perfect example of how competition works. They were both good because they both existed. But that is largely changing in a number of ways because the choice is greater. Sky News has, taken a turn into there's certainly a sense, and I'm sure people who work there are infuriated by this and say, no, it's no different to it always was. Something feels different, something feels less relevant. And at the same time, the BBC have also taken that turn. But the notion of having a state-funded, impartial, they should be impartial anyway, but you take my point, broadcaster of news, online radio, TV, is not a bad idea. So I can see the arguments in that. I can see the arguments in the social aspect. So not, every older person on limited funds, or anyone on limited funds, but particularly people who might be elderly, live on their own, would either have access or the desire or the funds to pay for Netflix and Amazon Prime and Disney Plus and Apple TV, and there's others. The list goes on, as you know. So it has that service to it as well. I'm thinking of the kids stuff like CBeebies when they get that right. There's an educational component to it and all the rest of it. But it's just so darn hard now to say I could justify this. I sat there, against my wishes, we got Disney Plus a couple of weeks back. My other half said, the kids will love it. Well, who wouldn't love 14,000 Disney movies in one place? I thought it was the instant gratification thing came to our house that day. So we sat there last night and watched The Incredibles, and I was just flicking through it thinking, imagine as a kid, somebody said, every Star Wars movie you ever wanted to see, there, right now. Every Toy Story movie you ever wanted to see, right now. You want to see the classics, the Aristocats, Jungle Book, Pinocchio, all of that there right now. You want to watch Soul, it's there right now. You want to watch any of the new stuff, it's there right now. The Marvel, it's there. Everything is there. And there is a sense of, this is a bit grotesque. It's almost too much. Go on, have it and have it now. But it does highlight the difficulty the BBC have. And I think they will go on having it. I don't know what form it should take, if it should take a form at all.